Hi there, this is Sherry Hayes with MomDelights.com, and today we are going to discuss how to find your homeschool style and how important it is. So, I'm going to do a lot of talking, so if you want to, grab a basket of laundry or wash some dishes while you're listening and enjoy. Homeschooling is a journey. And as with every journey, when you start out, you rarely, especially if it's the first journey you've ever taken, or first journey to a certain place you've ever taken, you don't know all the ins and outs of that journey. You don't know all the places where you'll stop. You don't know what the landscape looks like necessarily. Even with Google Maps today. So when we were moving from our old place to this new place, there were things we encountered that we couldn't find out on Google Maps or anything. We just had to be surprised. And we had to adapt according to the different challenges that we met along the way. Homeschooling is like that, of course. When you think in the Bible, when God called Abraham out from Ur of the Chaldees and he called him to the place that I will show you, he didn't tell him necessarily where that place was. Abraham had to trust God, and he had to trust God for every point along the way, and he had to trust that God had a good destination. And homeschooling, if we're doing it in faith, that's what it is. We have to trust God for our destination. So when we do that, everybody needs a style. Now, you won't have this style necessarily when you first start out because you're just getting your sea legs, as it were. But maybe by listening to my journey and some different principles I can give you, maybe it won't be as confusing because, the other day I just got this here, this catalog, and I know a lot of you are getting catalogs and all the different things, and when you look through these pages, the language, arts, possibilities, all the different possibilities are myriad. And so how do you choose? What do you choose? And then you've got all these different voices telling you this, that, and the other thing. So we're going to try to narrow down some of those voices so that when you're in the back of your mind, you're not thinking, I'm not doing it right. How can I do it right? I don't know if I'm doing it right. I'm going to hurt my children. Okay, so the different elements you will need in order to navigate on this journey of finding your homeschool style will be, first, you need prayer. You need to seek the Lord. You need to say, Lord, I need your help. Humbling yourselves before the Lord and ask Him. He says when you ask for wisdom, He gives it liberally. So just say, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing. Please lead me and guide me. And He will. And some of the things He'll tell you to do will be some of the things I do and others do, and some will be completely different, and that will be okay. All right, because there's really no 100% way to do it correctly. And some of it is when you're actually trying out different things. That's part of the whole education process as well, because your children are seeing that you're taking an active interest in learning, and that will teach them something right there. Okay, so the next thing is that you need to observe your children and to observe them as people, not products, not boxes to check off. Just what is your child like? And a lot of ways to do this is to read aloud to your children and then talk about what you're reading. And with little kids, that can be nursery rhymes and folk tales, and you just talk to them and they tell you. And something about reading literature, when you talk about the literature, it opens their hearts up to you and their minds, and you discover things about them that maybe you didn't know. And when you find these things out about them, then you will know more how to proceed. So, and also, the next thing is observe yourself. Okay, what kind of a learner are you? What kind of things are you interested in doing? What are your strengths? And how could you improve? Maybe there's parts of your life that you want to improve in. Homeschooling can help you improve that. Let's say you don't feel like you can express yourself well, either in writing or in speech, and homeschooling can help you with that. Let's say that you have a deficit. I have a deficit in elocution. No, let's say you have a deficit in math. And so what you want to do is you want to concentrate. As your child's learning math, you learn math too, and you become better. There's all kinds of stuff that homeschooling lends, but it's about more of a relationship than it is product. Remember, we talked about that before. Okay, the next thing you need to do is you need to discover what true education is. Now, there's a book. Now, first off, forgot to tell you this, but we are loosely following the outline of my book, Homeschool Sanity, which you can purchase from Amazon. And I wrote this about 12 years ago. No, was it 2011? No, about 12 years ago. And so I've learned a lot since, but the principles in here are very sound, and so I'm going to loosely follow this outline. And so the first part of the book is dedicated to finding out what real education is and what your homeschool style is. So anyway, along with that though, a lot of what led me to write that book is from other people that I gleaned information and inspiration from. And one of them is John Taylor Gatto. And this is the pre-publication edition of the Underground History of American Education. John Taylor Gatto was New York City Teacher of the Year and New York State Teacher of the Year because he had so much success with children that he taught in the inner city. And if you read his accounts of what happened to him in the classrooms where he taught, he went into schools where the paint was peeling off of the walls. Excuse me, those are some footsteps upstairs. Where paint was peeling off of the walls, where they didn't have textbooks to go around for the whole class. And so he thought, what am I going to do with these kids? They just have to sit here for like an hour, and I have nothing to tell them, nothing to talk to them about. He just was flummoxed. So he discovered that you could get a free subscription for the entire classroom to the newspaper. So he just, every day they got a newspaper, and he had said everybody had to sit and they had to read the newspaper, and then they would discuss different things happening all over the city, and they would talk about problems and how they could help find solutions. And these children went on to grow up to start their own businesses. They did all kinds of amazing things because of that. And he called it the guerrilla curriculum is what he called it. But anyway, so what that did is he was actually an advertising agent before he became a teacher. He just couldn't find work. So he became a teacher, and it shocked him what was going on in the public school system there in New York City. And it caused him to do deep dives into how education got to that point in America. And so in this book, he's come to a lot of conclusions. He shares a lot of information, a lot of footnoted information that is very eye-opening, to say the least. And in the beginning, he shares these three, okay, he calls it 3 outlooks on human condition, each of which demands a different kind of schooling to achieve. So the reason we have to go down to the very foundational basics of education in order for us to develop our own style. Because the style that was used on us in public education is based on a philosophy. And if we don't have the right philosophy, our style will reflect the default to that one, okay? Okay, now number 1 is the behaviorist. Okay, this is written by B.F. Skinner. Now he's a darling of the education system. They love him. I have his book back here. It's called Beyond Freedom. And in that book he asserts that human beings do not deserve freedom because they don't know what to do with it. Yes. It's the kind of book that a tyrant would read. It's like the WEF has used this as their textbook. I've got to tell you. Okay, anyway. The behaviors. Individuals will be more and more deeply embedded in complex hierarchical structures. Their interaction will be mediated by the interaction of the many socio-cultural unities in which they and their primary groups jointly form. The more you organize, the more you regiment. To create the fully organized human society is to create the fully regimented human cog. Doesn't that sound romantic? Isn't that what you want to be part of? Just the regimented human cog. Now remember, he's the darling of the education system that we have in America. He's the one that, they just fawn over, B.F. Skinner, right? Along with a few others, but he's among them, okay? This guy, I don't know, I don't want to raise my kids like that. I don't want to raise my kids to be a cog, part of the human cog. I don't want them to be, regimented and organized. I don't want them to, but that's what they're trying to do. They've been trying to do this since the 20s at least, right? Okay, that's the behaviorist. That's number 1. Number 2 is the scientific humanist. Okay. Now this is written by Erwin Laszlo in The Systems View of the World. This is another one of those fun ones. Wait. We have enormous control capabilities. As we manipulate the organs and cells of our body through medicines and surgery, so we can manipulate the many strands of social and ecological relations around us. We know fairly clearly what constitutes organic health for our biological system. Now we must likewise learn the norms of our manifold ecologic, economic, political, and cultural systems. The supreme challenge of our age is to specify and learn to respect the objective norms of existence within the complex and delicately balanced hierarchic order. Doesn't that sound lovely? I mean, there's no personage in this whole thing. It's supposedly humanist, which is supposed to be about the human, but it's really mechanical and cold and awful, isn't it? Like, do surgeries and fix everything. Surgeries to fix everything. Does that sound familiar? Anyway, so number 3 is the human being. And we talked about last time, our children are not human doings, they are human beings. They exist because God exists as their creator, right? So, the human being. Only here in America were the common folk of the old world given a chance to show what they could do on their own, without a master to push and order them about. History contrived an earth-shaking joke when it lifted by the nape of the neck lowly peasants, shopkeepers, laborers, paupers, jailbirds, and drunks from the midst of Europe, dumped them on a vast virgin continent, and said, "Go to it, it is yours." That is the spirit of America, okay? That is the spirit of freedom. See, okay, so B.F. Skinner wrote Beyond Freedom. John Holt wrote Freedom and Beyond. Okay. Now, you could argue that John Holt was also a humanist, just of a different flavor. But I would like for you to examine what are human beings. They are the pinnacle of God's creation on earth. God didn't give the earth to the pigeons and say, be fruitful, multiply, and take dominion. No, he didn't give it to the chimpanzees. Oh, thank God he did not. Okay, he didn't give it to the dolphins, although they're supposed to be some of the most intelligent sea creatures. Okay, he gave it to the pinnacle of creation, the man that he formed from the dust of the earth, and he breathed his breath into man. He made him the pinnacle, and he gave the earth to us. So that means when we are talking about education, man is just not a byproduct. He's not just another creature. He's just not a thing that happened accidentally because of all the, the chain reaction of all the different DNA, of all the DNA mutations that happened. Okay, that's not what God did. God was specifically creating a human being in his image, and with that he gave us dominion, and he gave us creativity, and he made us unique as individuals. That is our God-given personality. Those are our rights, everything right there. And so we do not belong according to the ideas of the behaviorists or the scientific humanists. We don't fit there. That's the devil's idea. That's the devil's idea. He wants to regiment us and use us for whatever purposes. He wants human beings. That's like torture and torment. That's living at the lowest ebb. That's saying that no, we are just a product of conception, all of us, and so we can be aborted at any time in our lives. Doesn't matter. We are just useless fodder. But God thinks of us as much greater than that. And so when we develop our sense of how we're going to educate our children, it's much more important than just shoving facts down their throat. Do you know what Einstein said? He said that public education was like this. It's like if you took a tiger that loved meat and you shoved meat down his throat for days and days. At the end, he would hate it, and he would never want an ounce of meat the rest of his life. He'd rather die than eat it. And you know what? That's what we do with education. We think our children are like these buckets, and we just keep pouring stuff in there. And you know what happens with a bucket, and you just fill it with water and you leave it? It gets putrid, right? But if you think of your child as like a hose, like this beautiful line that information flows in and out of, and it creates and it helps and it flows, and as it flows and as it's changing, then it's much less likely that there will be bacterial growth and fungus and all that kind of stuff, because it's a creative energy that's flowing through them. Does that make sense? I hope that didn't sound no-eg. Didn't mean it from it to me. Now, I'm going to get a board, and we're going to talk about, after we've come through and we've realized that we need to give our children freedom to be the creatures that God has created them to be, then we still need some order within that, right? And so I've kind of developed over the years this order, this general order that keeps me on track when I'm looking at education, no matter what style it is, okay? So as you can see on this chart, true education consists of 4 things. Number 1 is a child's relation to God and man. And so what does that mean? That means Bible knowledge, discipline, manners, spirituality is concerned, a biblical spirituality, to understand how to relate to God, how to relate to other people like siblings, parents, grandparents, neighbors, different authorities. Okay, so that's all within this relation to God and man. Okay. Number 2 are tools. And tools are basically reading, writing, arithmetic, research skills, and discernment. Discernment is one of those skills that kids need, because kids are free and they're free to choose, and they need to know how to choose. They're not just out there, you're like, okay, now you know the basic facts, now go to college and go to all the parties and, you know, do all the things because you have no discernment, but you're really smart and you passed all the tests. No, that's not how it works, is it? Okay, so you need to give them tools. They need to know how to read well. If your child can read well, they can read anything they want, and they can glean the information they need. Okay, they need to know how to write well, because writing is just communication on paper or digitally, whatever. They need to know arithmetic because they're going to need to know about finances. They're going to need to know about when they purchase something, when they make their money, where their money's going. They need to know these things for their lives, and also someday they might have their own business. They need to know these things, right? Okay, content. That's where this, now usually we put like content right at the top. Content, we think they know about science, history, and geography. I've got to tell you, when your kid, especially when your kids are little, everybody thinks I got to teach them history and science. Not so much. Concentrate on the 3 R's. Get them really good and going, and then the stuff they learn about science, history, and geography, they will retain. If you teach them too little, you'll have to reteach it anyway. Now, you can go with if they want to know about things, you can do like little unit studies. We'll get into that more later. But anyway, basically, content, the facts about science, history, and geography, that's one of the ingredients here. Okay, number 4, application and life skills. Taking the tools and the knowledge and how to live and applying them to real life stuff. Applying them to the arts, applying them to crafting, to taking care of themselves, their bodies, taking care of their homes, taking care of a business, taking care of their health, taking care of their relationships, being a good citizen, being a good family member, being a good neighbor, knowing politically how to navigate that, how to stand for freedom. All of these things, you're taking all of the tools, the content, the spirituality, and you're applying them to real life situations. So as you can see, these things are so very important that you have to get this in place, get this indelible in your mind. And next, after that, then we can talk about the different schooling styles that are out there already. Education styles, and the one pretty much in, now that there's some shades of difference in different, there are some shades of difference in institutions. Some public schools do things a little bit differently than others. But by and large, the conventional public school system is based on lecture, textbook, questions, testing, and like that. So that's basically how it does it, right? I mean, all of the different things that you don't really find very much room for a lot of personal expression of interest in that. You know what I'm trying to say. And so that is actually a style. It's actually a method. when you do, and they call it school at home, but I think, we think that because we buy a Christian curriculum that all of a sudden it's going to magically turn into a homeschool curriculum. And, and I understand that, and I respect people who decide that they really want to go with the textbook option because it's familiar, and maybe they feel in their lives that they don't feel competent or they're busy, whatever, and they believe this is like a one-stop thing and they just have their kids do it. And maybe they supplement with all kinds of real life stuff. It can happen. It can work. Okay, but by and large, it does not, because that system is set up under the behaviorist and the scientific humanist idea. That's the whole reason they formulated that, because people don't normally learn like that. If you took a child and you were on an island, well, I'll just share an actual testimony of a man who lived by a river. I don't know if I've shared this before, but if you haven't heard it before, that's good, right? So a man who lost his wife, and he lived by a river in a tent because he just got tired of society. He was a little bit of a hermit, and he had a little girl, and he kept that little girl with him, and maybe it wasn't the best situation for her, but after a few years, when they discovered that he had this little girl in his tent by the river and he had not been taking her to school, they took her and they tested her, and she tested above her grade level in math and reading and writing. And how did he do this? Well, he had an old set of encyclopedias, and he had some tablets and pencils, and he just taught her himself. And he didn't have to rely on the system, and she did better than the system. Of course, that made him really look bad, I'll imagine. That, he probably paid $10 for these old encyclopedias, maybe $10 worth of supplies, and she was doing better than public schooling. Shoot, that helps them not to that's hard then it makes it hard for them to justify spending, what is it? It's up to $23,000 per student per year that the government spends on education in public schools. Did you know that? Yeah. So, if he could do it for how many years on maybe $10, and they say it takes $23,000. You understand? It really messes with it. So they want to, don't tell people. Don't tell them they can be successful. No. Okay. Anyway, so I digress. I'm not advocating that you keep your children in a tent by the river. I'm not saying that. Okay, but I'm just saying that if you took a child and you didn't have anything else and you use those methods, it could work still. Okay, so when we think that the way to educate children is just the books and the textbooks, I did that at first. I got the textbooks, and I got the workbooks, and I got the answer books, and we just went through that, and it was so hard on some of my kids, for lots of reasons. For one thing, the pace was either too slow or too fast in these books, or it made them do a lot of busy seat work stuff that just it killed their love of learning. It was just fill in the blanks, check the boxes, fill in the blanks, and it just they didn't want to be interested anymore. A lot of kids have that killed in them, And so that's the first method, and that's because of the mindset that's in public schools. Now there are many, many more, and we will be going over these one by one. I don't want to take up too much time in this first video on this. I want to be able to take our time with these methods and go over them. Okay, there's school at home. We talked about that. There's online stuff, and we can explore that a little bit too. There's unit studies, classical, Montessori, Waldorf, Moore formula, Charlotte Mason, relaxed, outsourcing, unschooling, and the university model, which I had never heard of. That's a recent one for me. So anyway, there's all kinds of stuff that we can go over. We can talk about what are the best parts and the worst parts. We've got the pros and cons, and what are the best parts you can pull out, and what are the worst things that you probably want to avoid. And so that way, as we're going through this, it'll help you narrow down what is best for you and your family. I hope it'll help you. So I'm going to stop here so that I don't take too much of your day, and you can go, now that you've washed the dishes and you fold the laundry, now you can actually go and, go play with your kids or something. So you have a wonderful day. Please like and subscribe. Bye-bye.